So last week, we finished up chapter 48 of the book of Genesis. And if you remember, that's where Jacob brought in Joseph and Ephraim and Manasseh. And he blessed Ephraim and Manasseh, placing Ephraim, the youngest, over Manasseh, and gave them the blessings of Abraham, if you remember. He says, I put the name of Abraham and Isaac upon you. And so basically claiming them as his own children. And in that way, he actually promoted Joseph to getting one more portion than the rest of his brothers. And so, kind of like the birthright. He couldn't officially do it, so he did it in this way. But sometime later, we enter into Genesis 49. And in Genesis 49, verse 1, it says, "And Jacob called his sons and said, 'Gather together, that I might tell you what shall befall you in the last days.'" And so Jacob has gathered all of his sons together to give them his final words, basically. He knows he's about to die. And so he's bringing them in to give them their final blessing and to also kind of give them an idea of what God has shown him for the future. And so today we're just going to go over those blessings. And he says, starts out in verse 2, he says, "Gather together and hear, you sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father." He makes it very flowery and like a prepared speech. He's got it going. And so he starts off and he says, "Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power. Unstable as water, you shall not excel. Because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch." Now, at the beginning, he says, excellency of dignity and excellency of power. He's basically saying, you've excelled in dignity and you've excelled in power. He says, but you will excel no more. You're unstable as water. You shall not excel. And so, although you have accomplished some things, you're not going beyond that. And the reason is because you went and defiled my bed. And that happened, if you remember, in Genesis 35:22. It says, "And it happened when Israel dwelt in the land, that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard about it." So that was when it happened. That sealed Reuben's fate. And if you remember, since then, he's been trying to get back on his dad's good side by trying to rescue Joseph, and then saying, "Kill me if I don't bring Benjamin back to you." You know, he's always doing these grand gestures, trying to get his father's attention. Doesn't work. And Jacob tells him, "You're unstable as water. You shall not excel in life." Final words of the father. Then he goes in verse 5 and he says, "Simeon and Levi are brothers. Instruments of cruelty are in their dwelling place. Let not my soul enter their counsel. Let not my honor be united to their assembly. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they hamstrung an ox. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel." So Simeon and Levi, instruments of cruelty, instruments of violence, are in their tents. In other words, they just dwell on violence and cruelty. It says, in their anger they slew a man, in their self-will they hamstrung an ox. It ticked them off, so they hamstrung it. And it's just, you get this picture of what these two brothers were like. And he says, "Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce." If you remember, whenever Dinah was defiled by Hamor and Shechem, his son, that is, it was Simeon and Levi. I've been missaying it for the last few weeks, saying it was Reuben and Simeon, but it was actually Simeon and Levi. They led the charge against Shechem, got all of the men in the city to get circumcised, and then in the third day, whenever they were healing and they were in the most pain, it was Simeon and Levi that went in and killed every male in the city. And that was in Genesis chapter 34. Simeon and Levi came boldly on this and killed every male. And Jacob even told him, you've made me a stench to the people of this land, and they will rise up and kill us all. All your fault. And they decided to move right after that happened, to make sure that the inhabitants of the land didn't do it. And so he said, cursed be their anger. They're fierce. It's not a good thing, because they don't think before they act. And he says, I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. And it's interesting because this basically happens because after the time of the conquest in the book of Genesis, or in Joshua, you don't hear of Simeon anymore. You very rarely hear about Simeon and his descendants. They're scattered in Israel. And of course, Levi, although it gains the priesthood, they receive no inheritance in the land. They are literally scattered throughout the tribes of Israel, just as Jacob said they would be. He says, you don't get an inheritance in the land. That's God's words to him. He's honoring Jacob's blessing. He says, you don't get an inheritance. I'm your inheritance. Therefore, you have no land that is actually yours. Then he moves on to Judah, and he says, Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down. He lies down as a lion. And as a lion, who shall rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the people, binding his donkey to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth are whiter than milk. So Judah, all of a sudden, he starts out with, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. It almost gives you this idea of coming home in a triumphal parade. You know, his brothers are praising him as he walks down the street. You know, that's the kind of idea it gives you here. He says, your father's children shall bow down to you. You're a lion's whelp. You devour the prey and you lie down as a lion. And as a lion, who's going to try and get you up? You know, he gives all this imagery. And he says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah. It's interesting because according to 1 Chronicles 5, 1 through 2, it literally says, now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, he was indeed the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph. So the birthright passed to Joseph because of what he did. The son of Israel, so that the genealogy is not listed according to birthright. Yet Judah prevailed over his brothers, and from him came a ruler, although the birthright was Joseph's. So it's interesting because we still have this who's in charge idea. According to 1 Chronicles, although Joseph got the birthright because he got the double portion, it was kind of tricky the way he did it, but he did it. Judah prevails over the rest of his brothers and becomes the ruler. And Jacob was already seeing this. He said, the scepter shall not depart from Judah until Shiloh comes. And I've always wondered what Shiloh means. And it's actually an untranslated Hebrew word. In other words, it's not really known what Shiloh means. But we've taken it to mean throughout the centuries that it's to him who it belongs. So he literally says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, or a lawgiver between his feet, until the person to whom it belongs comes. Who is Jesus? Because it says, and to him shall be the obedience of people. That word people is actually in plural. If they would have translated it right, it should be peoples or nations. And so we have that interesting, and Shiloh is also considered a title for the Messiah. And so they recognize this as Messiah is going to come through Judah, because Jacob talked about it way back when Judah was still alive. And he says the obedience of the people, and it's the nations. Jacob was actually prophesying, seeing it as a much broader scope than you're going to rule over Israel. He says you're going to rule over everyone. And so, I mean, and the other writers in the Bible also pick it up, because we have a few that I picked out. It says in Psalm 2:8, says, "Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance." Daniel 7:13 and 14 says, "Therefore, or there before me was one like the Son of Man. He was given authority, glory, sovereign power. All peoples, nations, and men of every language worshipped him." Then in Revelation 5:5 and 9, it says, "See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed." And they sang a new song, "You are worthy. With your blood you purchased men for God from every tribe and language and people and nation." He says, Judah, you are going to be the ruler until the real ruler shows up. And so that's what we see. And he says, he goes on, he says, "Binding his donkey to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he washed his garments in wine and his clothes in the blood of grapes." I was always like, what in the world is he trying to say? But basically, wine and having vines for growing grapes to make wine was seen as a symbol of prosperity. And this symbol of prosperity was used for common things because they were so prosperous that where else is he going to tie up his donkey but on one of the most prosperous things that symbolize the prosperity of our tribe? We're going to tie it to the choicest vine. This prosperity is used for common things. Same thing with the wine. Washing his clothes in grapes, in wine. It's like your prosperity is so prosperous that it's like we wash with the things that people couldn't even afford to get. It's kind of like whenever Solomon was reigning. It says everything was made out of gold because silver was so abundant that it was counted as nothing. I mean, can you imagine a society where silver was like, I don't want silver. That's nothing. No, you can't pay me in silver. You know, it's just like, it's kind of hard for us to wrap our minds around. But that's what he's saying here. He says the prosperity is so great that we use it for the common base things. And that's what we can use it for. And then he says his eyes are darker than wine and his teeth are whiter than milk. He's just saying he's the picture of strength and power. That's what he looks like. Now the next few of them, they're very brief, and we don't see a whole lot about them. So he starts off in verse 13. He says, "Zebulun shall dwell by the haven of the sea. He shall become a haven for ships, and his border shall adjoin Sidon." Which is interesting because according to Joshua chapter 19, Zebulun's territory doesn't come near the sea. But Jacob says he's not only going to extend all the way to the sea, but he's going to be part of Sidon, and he's going to be bordered up against that. So it's a much larger territory that he sees in mind for Zebulun, though we have not seen it come to pass yet. Issachar is a strong donkey. Laying down between two burdens, he saw that rest was good and that the land was pleasant. He bowed his shoulder to bear a burden and became a band of slaves. Basically, he's a hard worker. But whenever he saw rest in the promised land, he took rest. But he still works like a slave sometimes. Dan is a judge. Verse 16, "Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path, that bites horses' heels, so that its riders fall off backwards. I have waited for your salvation, O Lord." Dan is kind of interesting because Dan means judge. And because if you remember his mom, Leah, was it Leah? One of them said, "God has judged my case." Therefore she named him Judge, Dan. And he says, "He shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. He shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path, that bites the horse's heels and makes its rider fall off backwards." I always thought, that doesn't sound like a very good judge. That sounds kind of malicious and sneaky, right? But think about it this way. You may think that you've gotten away with something and you're riding along victorious on your horse as you're riding by. But that snake can bite the horse's heel and knock you down. It's a judgment. You will face the true judge one way or another. And that's why he ends with the whole, I have waited for your salvation, O Lord. The true judge. You may think you're victorious, but you will be judged. Gad, a troop shall tramp upon him, but he shall triumph at last. Bread from Asher shall be rich, he shall yield royal dainties. Naphtali is a deer let loose, he uses beautiful words. These three, don't say much about them. Gad is going to have some problems. People are going to try and run over him, but eventually he will become the troop. He will be the bigger party. Then he says, bread from Asher shall be rich, he shall yield royal dainties. I always thought, does that mean he's going to be a baker? What's going on? But it's prosperity. He's going to be so prosperous, he's going to have all kinds of these wonderful foods. Naphtali is a deer let loose. He uses beautiful words. Evidently, Naphtali was a poet. I don't know if he knew it or not, but he was a poet. And then we come to verse 22, Joseph. It says, Joseph is a fruitful bough by a well. His branches run over the wall. The archers have bitterly grieved him, shot at him, and hated him. But his bow remained in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong. By the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel, by the God of your father who will help you, and by the Almighty who will bless you. With blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb, blessings of your father, the blessings of your father have excelled the blessings of my ancestors, up to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him who is separate from his brothers. So with Joseph, he starts off with the problems. He said he was a fruitful bough by a well. His branches run over the wall. In other words, he was prosperous. Even before he went to Egypt, Joseph was prosperous. Well, of course he was prosperous. He was his dad's favorite child. And so he says, but the archers were grieved at him and hated him and bitterly shot at him. His brothers sold him into slavery. He said, but his bow remained in strength and the arms of his hands were made strong. Joseph didn't give up. It's evident from what we've read, Joseph did not give up. He never once counted his brothers with any wrongdoing. Never once. The ones who literally stripped him, threw him into a pit, and then sold him as a slave. He never said that they did anything wrong. In fact, he said, you tried to do this evilly, but God meant it for good. You didn't send me down here. God did. I tell you, we have to have more, we need more people like Joseph that can see God's hand in things like that. But then he says, by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob, from there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel, by the God of your father who will help you, and by the Almighty who will bless you. Up until this point, and even whenever he talks about Benjamin afterwards, he talks, Israel talks, and he says, he says, you're going to be prosperous. He says, this is what's going to happen. And he alludes to a blessing. But whenever he talks about Joseph, he blatantly says, God bless you. The others, he doesn't do that for. And he says, the Almighty will bless you. And then he says, with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of breast and of the womb, the blessings of your father have excelled the blessings of my ancestors, up to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. In other words, I have been blessed more than Abraham and Isaac. Why would he say that? Because he has kids. Remember Abraham's first and really his only request of God. How can you call me blessed if the heir of my house is my servant? That's what he told God. And God said, no. Come outside. Look up at the stars. Your descendants are going to be more than those stars. the sand that you're walking. You're going to have more ancestors, or more descendants, than the sand that's under your feet. And so Jacob is actually seeing the results of it, and he says, I've been blessed more than all my ancestors. And he says, these blessings shall be on the head of Joseph. This is the same thing he did whenever he brought Ephraim and Manasseh in, because he said, the God of Abraham and Isaac bless you. May their name be upon you. In other words, you are the ones inheriting the blessings of Abraham and the blessings of Isaac. Because whenever you look at it, blessings of the deep, blessings of heaven above, of the breasts of the womb, that's multiplication. And so we have the blessings of Abraham and Isaac, and he's blessing it directly onto Joseph through Ephraim and Manasseh. It says, and on the crown of him, of the head of him who was separate from his brothers. Brings it all back. He starts off with, you were prospering, they grieved at you, but you're here now, we're blessing you, and they shall be on the head of him who is separate from his brothers. Brings it all full circle and brings it back to what happened to him. In verse 27, it says, Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. There's only two of the brothers who were compared to predatory animals. You have Judah, who is a lion, and Benjamin, who is a wolf. And I find it interesting because out of those two, Saul, the first king of Israel, was from Benjamin. David, who was the second king of Israel, was from Judah. And so you have the two predatory wolves that led the entire nation for time. And so that's kind of what happened. And he says, Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. In other words, he prospers in what he does. He doesn't have to worry about it. And in verse 28 he says, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father spoke to them. And he blessed them, and he blessed each one according to his own blessing. Then he charged them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field of Ephron the Hittite as a possession for a burial place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife, and there I've buried Leah. The field and the cave that is there were purchased from the sons of Heth. And when Jacob had finished commanding his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. I don't know if it happened quite that fast, but what he did is he gave out those last blessings, and the last thing he did, he says, now, there's going to come a time when I die. When I die, do not bury me in Egypt. He's already gotten the promise from Joseph, but he wants to make sure all the other brothers know it too. He says, do not bury me in Egypt. Bury me with my fathers. Abraham purchased a field with a cave in it from Ephron the Hittite. There they buried Abraham and Sarah. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah. He says, and there I've already put Leah. When I die, that's where I need to be buried. To his final breath, Israel believed in the promise of God. There was no fear. There was no questioning. He knew it. He said, there's going to come a time whenever you guys inherit that land, and I want to be buried there because that's my land. That's my country. I'm not an Egyptian. Don't bury me here. Take me and bury me there. There's a story, I can't remember It's one of the great theologians of the past. And he was there, and he was arrested for being a Christian. And they told him he was already 80 years old. He was an old man, and they were about to execute him. And they told him, all you have to do is renounce Jesus. And he made a statement. He said, all these long 80 years, he has been by my side. How could I walk away from him now? So many people are unsure or scared of what happens after death. But whenever you walk with the Lord, you don't have to worry. You know what happens. You're protected. You're taken care of. And Israel didn't lose hope. He said, I haven't seen it yet. I have not seen. My family, my entire household is down here in Egypt. But there's a promise that was given to me. God gave it to Abraham. He passed it down to Isaac. And Isaac passed it to me. And God spoke to me individually. And he said, to your descendants, I will give this land. I can't see it yet because you guys are down here in Egypt. But there's coming a day that you're going to be up there. So that's where I need to be. Bury me up there. That's the kind of faith we need in the world today. And whenever he had got done commanding his sons, it says he drew his feet up back into the bed. Sorry. Back into the bed. He breathed his last, and he died. He was gathered to his people. That was it. What a way to go, if you will. To bring all your children in and say, these are the things that have happened. These are the blessings I give you. And these are the last commands that I want done with my body. And that's it. Israel has passed on the blessing to Joseph and the rest of his children, and now it's in their hands. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for today. Thank you for all that you've done for me. Thank you for all that you've blessed us with and taken care of us. Father, I pray that you would help us to realize the blessings you have given us. I pray that you would help us to have the faith that Abraham, Isaac, and Israel had, Lord. Father, that we would trust in you, that we would know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you take care of us and that you honor your promises, and you will take care of us till the end. Lord, help us to have that kind of faith that trusts in you till our last breath. Lord, I pray that you would take care of us, you would protect us and keep us this week. Lord, bring us back safely next week. In Jesus' name, amen.